Okay, so you've brought us some really interesting source material for this deep dive. We're looking at an entry from Massimo Plavsic today,
That's the one. Yeah, it introduces this system called TranslAItor.
Translator, and it's about real-time translation for multilingual conversations. But reading through it, it feels like there's, well, a much bigger ambition here than just, swapping words.
Oh, absolutely. That's what grabbed me too. The source lays out this vision, right? Tackling global communication barriers, which we all know about, but it comes at it from a really different angle.
Different how?
Well, it goes way beyond just the words. The core idea, the really fascinating part, is this focus on preserving how we speak, not just what we say.
How we speak. You mean like our actual voice?
Exactly. The ambition is to enable conversations that feel, truly direct, authentic, connected, even if you and I don't speak the same language. It's about keeping the person, their vocal identity in the conversation.
Okay, let's really unpack that. Because, yeah, the source starts with the obvious problem, language barriers. They limit us.
Yeah.
But then it zeroes in on something it says often gets completely lost when we translate.
Right. And it argues this loss element is absolutely crucial. It points straight to the importance of vocal identity.
Vocal identity.
Yeah. We usually think translation is just about, grammar, words, meaning, a linguistic puzzle. But our voice, our human voice, it carries so much more, a whole layer of information that words alone just can't capture.
Right, it's that stuff under the literal meaning.
Precisely.
So what kind of information are we talking about? Beyond just the dictionary definitions, what does the voice carry?
Well, the source gets specific. It mentions things like emotions, our intentions, where we place emphasis, even like parts of our personality. Think about saying something simple like, I'm fine, right?
Yeah.
You can say I'm fine and mean it. Or you could say it dripping with sarcasm. Or sound resigned. Or totally frustrated. The words I'm fine don't change.
But the meaning is completely different.
Completely. It's the way you use your voice, the intonation, right? The pitch going up or down, how fast you say it, maybe a little tremor in your voice, or a sudden sharp edge. That layer tells you if the person is happy, sad, confident, hesitant, everything, really.
That's a really critical point. If I say I'm fine sarcastically, and some standard translator just spits out the literal words I'm fine in, say, Japanese.
The listener gets the words, yeah.
But they miss the entire point. The feeling is gone. It's like reading a doctor's report that says patient reports feeling fine, but missing the look on their face that says they're in agony.
That's a great analogy, exactly. And the source argues that when this crucial vocal dimension gets stripped away or just flattened out by a generic synthetic voice, well, you lose something fundamental. You lose a key part of real human communication.
So you might exchange facts, but the connection.
The connection suffers. You miss the personality, the mood, the speaker's actual intent. And the source says this loss isn't trivial. It creates this psychological distance.
Psychological distance.
Right.
Yeah, I could feel that.
It stops you from having that truly direct, deeply connected dialogue, because the full communication, all its layers, just isn't getting through. The whole interaction feels mediated, less personal, a bit less human, maybe.
That feeling of distance, yeah, that's key. It's not just about getting the message across efficiently. It's about the quality of the interaction itself.
Okay, so if that's the problem, losing the voice leads to losing authenticity, losing that direct feeling. What's Translator's big vision? How does it plan to fix this?
The vision, as the source puts it, is pretty bold. Imagine a world where language barriers just aren't really a barrier anymore, where people from completely different backgrounds, different languages, can just talk freely, naturally, like they share a language.
Okay, that's the dream of translation tech generally, isn't it?
Yes, but here's the crucial bit. The vision isn't just about understanding the words. It's very specific about enabling people to express not just words, but their full range of emotions.
Through their own voice.
Exactly, through their own voice. That's the kicker. So it's not me speaking, and then some generic Siri or Alexa voice reads the translation, or even a synthesized voice that sounds kind of human-ish.
No.
It's translating my words, but the output voice sounds like,
Hey.
with my weird pauses, my intonation, my speed. Just speaking, I don't know, French.
That is absolutely the core promise. That's the goal. Translator wants to be, and this is the source's phrase, the invisible bridge.
An invisible bridge. I like that.
Connecting people across languages. But the focus isn't on replacing your voice. It's about carrying it across that language divide. The whole point is to help build authentic connections that go beyond language by making sure the speaker's unique identity, which is so tied up in their voice, doesn't get lost.
And that's what they think enables truly direct communication, because the speaker's actual presence, their personality, stays in the conversation.
That's the idea. Your voice remains intact, just speaking different words.
Okay, that's the vision. What about the mission? How are they actually planning to build this invisible bridge? What are the steps?
Well, the mission they state is kind of multifaceted, but it all centers on that key differentiator, the voice. They want to democratize multilingual communication, right? Using advanced real-time tech.
Standard goal for many platforms.
True, but the non-negotiable part, the critical piece for them, is preserving each speaker's unique vocal identity through the whole process.
Non-negotiable. So
Yeah.
it's core to the whole thing.
Absolutely. They talk about a commitment to solutions that are accessible, accurate in translation, sure, but also deeply respectful of cultural diversity, and specifically how culture is expressed through the way we use our voices.
Respecting cultural diversity in voice. That's interesting.
Yeah. The ultimate goal is letting everyone speak naturally, comfortably in their native language, using their own voice.
While being perfectly understood in another language.
Exactly, and crucially understood with the nuances of their original speech. Their tone, their rhythm, still there.
Which really reinforces that idea of direct dialogue. You don't have to flatten yourself out or perform for the translation machine. You just speak as you normally would.
You speak authentically as you. And the system's job is to make sure that authentic you, voice and all, gets conveyed to the listener just in a different language.
That is a powerful mission. It takes the tech beyond just being a tool and makes it about enhancing human connection. So how does it actually work? What's the technical process? The source must break that down.
It does. It details this quite sophisticated multi-step process, and it's designed to work in real time, which is vital, obviously, for conversation flow, while also handling that really tricky voice preservation piece.
Okay, walk us through it, stage by stage.
Right. So it kicks off with voice capture, and this isn't just like hitting record on a mic.
No.
It involves advanced audio capture techniques, plus pretty sophisticated filtering for ambient noise.
Getting rid of background sounds.
Exactly. The whole purpose here is fundamental. You have to isolate the speaker's voice incredibly cleanly. Get rid of background chatter, room echoes, street noise, whatever. You need the purest possible signal of just the speaker's voice.
Because if the input is messy,
then analyzing and recreating the specific nuances of that voice later, it's going to be compromised. Bad input, bad output. So this first stage is all about cutting through the real-world audio chaos to get a pristine recording of your voice stream.
got it. Clean capture first. Essential. What happens once it has that pure vocal signal?
Then that signal goes into voice analysis. This is where the system starts to figure out the qualities of that specific voice.
The how part.
Exactly. It performs this complex extraction process. The source calls it creating a detailed vocal profile. It's capturing the speaker's distinct audio signature, not just the words, but the unique characteristics of how they're saying them.
So it's learning my voice on the fly.
In essence, yes. This step is absolutely central to preserving identity. This is where the system gets trained, right then and there, on the nuances of the voice it's hearing.
Okay, captures cleanly, analyzes the unique fingerprint of the voice. Then comes the translation part, I assume. That sounds more familiar.
Yes, that leads into recognition and translation. So the voice analysis data, along with the clean audio, is used to convert the spoken words into text. That's the speech to text, the recognition.
Wow.
Then that text gets translated into the target language. The source mentions using advanced neural models here, which is pretty standard for top-tier machine translation these days.
And the goal here is just getting the words right.
Primarily, yes. Preserving the meaning, the context, maybe some cultural nuances in the language itself. This step focuses on the linguistic accuracy of the message.
Okay, so we've got the captured voice, its unique qualities analyzed. We've got the words recognized and translated. How does it stick the original voice back onto the translated words? That seems like the magic trick.
Well, that happens in the final, and you're right, the most crucial step, customized voice synthesis.
Synthesis. Creating the audio.
Right. The system takes the translated text, and it generates spoken audio in the target language. But, and here's the key difference, it does this while meticulously maintaining the original speaker's vocal characteristics, the ones it identified back in the voice analysis stage.
So it's not just text-to-speech.
No, definitely not generic text-to-speech. It's generating synthetic speech that is specifically tailored in real time to sound like you speaking the translated words. It's reapplying that preserved vocal identity, completing the loop, delivering the message ideally in the speaker's own voice.
Wow. Okay, that process makes sense. Speak, capture, and analyze voice, translate words, synthesize translated words using analyzed voice. It's like passing your voice's signature through the language barrier.
That's a good way to put it. And for this whole chain to feel direct, to enable that fluid conversation we talked about, the source really stresses performance, specifically minimal latency, low delay.
The speed.
Yes. They explicitly contrast TranslAItor with other solutions by highlighting its speed. They claim less than 300 milliseconds delay under optimal conditions.
Less than 300 milliseconds. That's pretty fast. Almost imperceptible. Why is that speed, that low latency, so critical for making it feel like direct dialogue?
Well, think about just chatting normally, face to face.
Okay.
There are pauses, sure, but they're usually tiny, right? Milliseconds. It allows for that quick back and forth, jumping in, reacting. Now imagine using, say, a typical translation app live. You talk. Then there's this noticeable silence.
Yeah, clunky. Seconds sometimes.
Exactly, seconds. While the app thinks, translates, speaks, it creates these awkward gaps, totally breaks the rhythm. The interaction feels super stilted, disjointed, fundamentally indirect.
You feel like you're talking to the app, not the person.
Precisely. You're waiting on the machine in the middle. The source emphasizes that this sub-300 millisecond latency is designed specifically to kill those disruptive pauses. It aims for a fluid, natural, conversational rhythm, making the whole experience feel much closer to just talking directly to someone, even with all this tech humming away underneath.
So the speed is what lets the voice preservation actually contribute to directness, not just create interesting audio after a long wait.
Exactly. Speed makes it conversational.
Okay, speed is essential, but the real heart of this, the standout feature according to the source, is that voice preservation. Let's really spend some time there. How do they actually say they do it? This is the core of that invisible bridge.
Right. This is where the tech gets really interesting. The source does offer some details on the specific methods they use to capture and then replicate all those tiny nuances that make a voice unique.
Okay, what are these methods? Lay them out for us.
Well, a primary one mentioned is spectral voice analysis.
Like looking at the sound frequencies.
Yes. Well, but way beyond just basic pitch or volume. The system is apparently designed to analyze a huge number of unique vocal parameters. The source says over 120 of them.
Whoa, 120 within the first few seconds of speaking.
That's what it claims, yeah.
That sounds incredibly detailed. What sort of parameters make up this vocal fingerprint they talk about? It can't just be pitch.
No, it's much richer. The source lists several key ones. Timbre.
Timbre, that's like the unique color or quality of a voice, right?
Exactly. What makes your voice sound like yours, even at the same pitch as someone else? Then there's intonation, the rise and fall, questions versus statements, surprise, sarcasm,
Yeah?
rhythm and speech rate. So how fast you talk, your specific cadence, the flow, and emphasis patterns, which words you stress naturally to change meaning or importance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Timbre, intonation, rhythm, rate, emphasis.
Analyzing over 120 factors like these, it creates this incredibly detailed vocal fingerprint, much more granular than typical voice systems look at. It's really trying to capture the unique essence of how you sound.
A vocal fingerprint, I like that term.
Mm-hmm.
It really drives home the idea of unique identity. So it's not just processing audio, it's profiling my specific vocal style.
That's the goal. And this analysis leads directly to another key method they mention, content form separation.
Content form separation. Sounds technical.
It is, a bit. But the concept is really clever. The system tries to intelligently disentangle two different things in your speech.
Which are?
The semantic content, that's the what, the literal meaning of the words you're saying. And the prosodic characteristics, that's the how. All those vocal qualities we just talked about. Intonation, rhythm, emphasis, timbre, your vocal style.
Okay, so it separates the what words from the how voice style. Why is that separation so important for preserving the voice?
Because it lets the system work on each part independently. Think about it. The linguistic content, the what, needs to be changed. It needs to be translated into another language.
Right. English words become Spanish words, for example.
But the expressive vocal qualities, the how, need to be kept, preserved. and then reapplied to the new translated words.
Ah, I see.
By separating them, they can translate the what without messing up or losing the how. The words change language, but the underlying emotional tone, the personal pacing, the unique vocal color that was in your original delivery that gets captured separately and is meant to be carried over.
So it translates the script, but keeps the original actor's performance, metaphorically speaking.
That's a really good way to think about it, yeah. The source calls this the technical heart of keeping the voice while changing the language. It's about manipulating the language layer without destroying the vocal characteristic layer.
Okay, that makes sense. Clever. So they capture the unique voice fingerprint, separate the how from the what, translate the what, and then how do they put the how back onto the translated what, that final step?
That final step relies on advanced voice synthesis. We touched on this. The source specifies using cutting-edge deep learning models for this part.
Okay.
Their purpose is to generate the translated message as audio. But critically, the synthetic voice it creates is designed to maintain the original speaker's analyzed vocal characteristics.
Using that vocal fingerprint it created earlier.
Exactly. It's not just generic text-to-speech. It's text-to-speech in the style and sound of the original speaker's voice. This is where the translated words get spoken aloud in a voice that's intended to sound recognizably like the person who first spoke, carrying their unique signature.
This whole chain.
Yeah.
The deep analysis, the separation, the tailored synthesis. It sounds incredibly complex, but the goal is simple. Make the translation sound like the original speaker. And the source talks about the impact of this, right?
Yeah.
Which brings us back to enabling that direct dialogue.
Yes, exactly. The impacts listed in the source are all about improving the quality and authenticity of talking across languages. They argue preserving the voice has several key effects.
What are they? Tell us about those effects.
Okay, first they say it helps create deeper emotional connections between speakers.
Which makes total sense for direct dialogue.
Right. When you can actually hear the genuine emotion, the excitement, the worry, the sincerity in someone's voice, even if it's synthesized based on their voice, it feels much more personal, much more connecting than, a flat robotic computer voice.
Yeah, a monotone translation loses all the juice.
Exactly. That vocal nuance carries empathy, humor, personality, stuff that words alone or a generic voice just can't convey. It lets the speaker's humanity shine through.
That makes perfect sense. Losing the emotion is losing a massive part of human connection.
Yeah.
What else? What's another impact?
The source also claims it reduces that psychological distance we talked about, the feeling that often comes with translated communication.
Right. The stiltedness, the feeling of indirection.
Yeah. By keeping the voice and by enabling that low latency, fluid conversation speed, the system aims to make the interaction feel much less mediated, much more like a real face-to-face chat, even though there's all this complex tech working away.
Getting rid of that feeling you're talking through a machine.
Exactly. That feeling of closeness, of talking directly to the person, that's a huge potential benefit.
That psychological distance, it's often what makes talking across languages feel so transactional, rather than truly communicative. Reducing that seems vital for authentic dialogue.
Couldn't agree more. And there's a third impact mentioned, which touches on culture.
Ah, yes, you mentioned cultural respect earlier.
Right. Preserving vocal identity helps maintain cultural aspects of communication that are tied up in how we use our voices.
How so?
Well, different languages, different cultures often have distinct patterns, right? Intonation contours, typical speech speeds, how emphasis is used, even the sort of default vocal tone.
Yeah.
These are part of how people express themselves, their background.
And losing those in translation can feel like losing a bit of yourself.
Exactly. It can feel like you're being flattened out, forced into a different communication style. By preserving these vocal nuances, TranslAItor aims to let people communicate authentically as themselves, with their full cultural and personal expression intact, even when the language changes.
Which should lead to more culturally respectful and just more real conversations.
That's the argument. More representative dialogue.
It's really fascinating how just focusing on the sound of the voice, not only the words, could potentially unlock deeper connection and understanding across languages.
Yeah.
Of course, none of this happens by magic. There must be some serious AI power under the hood. Let's look at that driving force the technology described in the source.
Yeah, the source does give some insight into the specific AI models and architectures that make this system tick. They're pretty crucial for hitting those targets of voice preservation, accuracy, and especially speed.
So what's the big picture? What's the overall AI structure like?
They describe it as a multi-model architecture.
Multimodal, so not just one big AI brain.
Exactly. It's more like a hybrid approach. It combines multiple specialized neural networks. The key idea here, as the source highlights, is that each network is optimized for a specific job in the whole translation process.
Oh, like a team of specialists.
Precisely. It's just a modular design. You might have one AI component fine-tuned for noise filtering, another for analyzing voice patterns, another for the core language translation, another for generating the final speech.
Which could make it more efficient, maybe more robust.
Potentially, yes. Easier to update specific parts. And it lets each component get really good at its one task, like having dedicated experts for each stage.
Okay, a system of specialized AIs working together. You mentioned generating the final speech. What kind of models do they use for that voice synthesis part?
For the neural voice synthesis, they're using advanced generative models. We talked about their role in the process flow. These models have the job of producing that natural-sounding speech in the target language.
But not just natural, personalized.
Exactly. Their crucial function, building on the voice analysis and the content-form separation, is to maintain those prosodic characteristics, the rhythm, pitch changes, emphasis, timbre of the original speaker's voice.
Because they're generating brand new audio.
Brand new audio, yes, that speaks the translated words but sounds like the original speaker, mimicking their unique style and quality. These generative models are the engines creating that final voice-preserved output.
Generative models are amazing at creating stuff that seems real. What about the input side? Dealing with real-world messiness, like background noise or people talking over each other.
Good question. That's where advanced acoustic models come in. The source specifically points to convolutional neural networks, CNNs, being used here.
CNNs, aren't those usually used for images, like identifying cats in photos?
They are. They're brilliant at finding patterns in spatial data, like pixels in an image. But here's the clever bit. Sound can be represented visually, as a spectrogram.
Ah, that graph showing frequency over time. Looks like a weird picture.
Exactly. And CNNs turn out to be really good at finding patterns and features within those audio images. The source says they're optimized for spectral analysis, reading those frequency patterns, and for voice recognition, especially when there's noise.
So they can see your voice pattern in the spectrogram, even with other sounds mixed in.
That's the idea. They're trained to isolate the user's voice, cutting through the noise. This directly tackles that challenge of getting clean input we discussed way back in the voice capture stage. The CNNs help filter the audio picture to focus on the speaker.
Okay, CNNs handle the audio cleanup and help identify the voice patterns. What about understanding the language itself? The meaning, the context, those subtle cultural bits.
For that really critical language understanding part, they use neural transformers.
Transformers, we hear a lot about those, like in GPT models.
Exactly. The source notes they're based on attention mechanisms, which have totally changed the game in natural language processing. Transformers are powerful because they can weigh the importance of different words in a sentence, or even across sentences, to get a much deeper grasp of context than older models could.
They figure out what really matters in the sentence.
Right. Their purpose in Translator is for deep contextual understanding, and importantly, for capturing those semantic and cultural nuances that a more basic translator might just miss. Making sure the translation isn't just literal, but actually conveys the intended meaning, the right tone, the appropriate cultural feel.
Okay, so you've got CNNs for the sound, transformers for the language meaning, generative models for the output voice, all working together in this multi-model system.
That sums it up pretty well. It's this sophisticated mix and layering of different advanced AI techniques, each playing a specialized role that the source presents as the key to enabling translators' main goal. High-quality, fast, voice-preserving translation. They're the engine built to deliver on that vision of bridging languages while keeping the speaker's voice, their identity, intact.
Wow. That was an incredibly detailed look at Translator, really drawing on that source material you brought. It paints a very clear picture of how it's supposed to work. Let's just take a second to quickly recap the main points, connecting them back to that core idea of enabling more direct dialogue before we wrap this deep dive.
Sounds good. So we started with the core problem, didn't we? Not just language barriers, but the loss of vocal identity in translation, the emotion, intent, personality, culture tied to how we speak, and how that loss hinders authentic, direct communication.
Right. Then we looked at Translator's big vision, overcoming that loss, building that invisible bridge for free, authentic conversation. And the key idea, letting speakers express not just words, but feelings, through their own voice, enabling those direct, genuine connections.
We then broke down the proposed process. Clean voice capture, deep analysis for a unique vocal profile, accurate recognition and translation of the words, and then that crucial step of synthesizing the translated speech using the original voice characteristics.
Wow.
All designed for low latency, for conversational flow.
When we really got into the weeds on how they preserve the voice, that spectral analysis of over 120 parameters for the vocal fingerprint, the smart separation of content, what from form, how, and the advanced deep learning synthesis models that recreate the message in the original speaker's voice.
And crucially, we linked all that tech back to the human impact, fostering deeper emotional bonds, shrinking that psychological distance you feel with typical translation tools, and respecting the cultural dimensions embedded in our voices. That's how it aims to go beyond just swapping words to enabling truly direct, resonant, and respectful dialogue.
Finally, we touched on the AI engine driving at all that multi-model architecture, using specialists like CNNs for handling the messy audio input, transformers for sophisticated language understanding, and those advanced generative models for crafting the final personalized voice output.
Yeah, the source describes a system aiming for a pretty significant step up in translation tech, really prioritizing the human side of communication by trying to keep the speaker's vocal identity front and center. It's not just about accuracy of information, but authenticity of the person.
Which brings us right back to direct dialogue. Translator, as described here, isn't just trying to beat the language barrier. It seems like it's trying to beat the barrier of mediated communication itself, trying to let the speaker's full presence, their personality, which is so tied to their voice, come through clearly. It's a really compelling vision for connection.
Really is. And the technical approach they outline, well, it suggests they're taking a serious swing at a very complex problem.
Definitely. So thinking about everything we've discussed from the source translator's vision, the tech, here's a final thought for you, for our listeners to chew on.
Yeah.
Our voice is so deeply connected to who we are, right? Our feelings, our identity, our culture. If technology could truly preserve that voice across languages, letting people hear us, not just a translation of our words, how might that fundamentally alter global interactions? What could it really mean for genuine understanding, for empathy, for connection in a world where maybe, just maybe, everyone's unique voice with all its richness, all its quirks, all its humanity could actually be heard and felt, no matter what language they speak? It certainly gives you a different way to think about the future of talking to each other across cultures.
That is a fascinating possibility to think about. Thanks for diving into this material with me today.
Always peeling back another layer. We appreciate you sharing these sources. Until the next deep dive.